The price tag on Michael Jackson's old home is certainly a thriller. His Neverland ranch in California has gone on sale for $100 million.
In 2015, it was listed for $100 million. Experts said it was a steal. Yet, it sat and sat till the price was slashed by 70%. Why? Why did the most famous property on Earth become a toxic asset that even billionaires were too scared to buy? It wasn't just the price. It was what was left behind inside the gates. Today, we uncover the dark timeline of Neverland. From a fairy tale kingdom to a rotting financial nightmare, and the chilling secrets hidden in the walls that kept buyers away, the dream and the delusion. When people think of Michael Jackson, they picture the music, the moonwalk, and the worldwide fame. But there is another side to his story that still stuns people. Far away from the stage, he created a private world for himself, a place that was more than a house. This was Neverland, bigger, stranger, and more extraordinary than anything most of us could even imagine. Now, at the time Michael built this place, he was at the peak of his career. He had fame, fortune, and the freedom to bring any idea to life. So, instead of settling for a regular mansion like other celebrities, he chose to create an entire world of his own. Neverland was so vast and unlike anything most people had ever seen. We are talking about 2,700 acres of land, more land than some small towns. It was indeed a place where every corner seemed designed to amaze, entertain, and astonish. But Michael didn't stop there. He filled Neverland with everything that could make it feel magical. There was a private zoo with elephants, giraffes, llamas, and other exotic animals. A full amusement park stood ready with bumper cars, a Ferris wheel, a pirate ship ride, and spinning swings. And as if these weren't enough, he added a train station with a small train that ran around the property. Instead of walking from one part of his home to another, he could ride the train through fields, gardens, and forests, as if he had stepped straight into a storybook. And as Neverland took shape, it became clear that this was more than just a rich man's playground. It was deeply personal. Michael built it to escape the pressure that followed him everywhere. After all, he never had a normal childhood. He went straight from school halls to global stages, never really having space to just be a kid. He saw Neverland as a place where he could reclaim pieces of this lost childhood. A space where he could, at least for a while, be a child again. This is where he got his Peter Pan idea. Michael often talked about believing in the spirit of Peter Pan, the dream of never really growing up. Neverland became more than just a home. It turned into a psychological fortress. It was the place he ran to when the outside world felt too heavy. A place where he could laugh without holding back and try to forget the pain that came with fame. Over time, the ranch became a mirror of the life he wished he could have had. Guests noticed something the moment they arrived. Michael loved symbols, and one image appeared everywhere: the Boy on the Moon logo. It was on the front gates, the bumper cars, small signs, decorations, and even painted 60 feet wide on the ground. No matter where you looked, it was there. For fans, it seemed cute and dreamy, but for some visitors, it was a little unsettling. The ranch was stamped with the same image again and again, turning the whole place into one giant brand built around a single idea. Of course, to Michael, none of this was strange. This was his dream, and he wanted the entire ranch to feel like it had stepped right out of a children's storybook. He wanted innocence, light, and imagination everywhere he looked. The logo was just another part of that fantasy. But for outsiders, it started to feel different. Neverland didn't seem like a home anymore. It felt more like a theme park, built around one man's very personal dream. Life in Neverland really felt like a fairy tale. Groundskeepers, security guards, ride operators, animal caretakers, cooks and cleaners were everywhere, keeping the ranch running. Music played through hidden speakers. Fountains sprayed water into the air. Children visited often, laughing and playing. Michael himself moved through it all, smiling and greeting people with joy. Visitors said the ranch felt warm and safe, like a place where you could forget the outside world existed. But the world Michael Jackson had carefully built was soon disrupted, and sadly, nothing was ever the same again. The turning point. The day the magic died. In 2003, the peace of Neverland was disrupted when police raided the ranch after a 13-year-old boy accused Michael Jackson of hurting him. The news spread instantly, and the magical ranch was suddenly at the center of a criminal investigation. Cameras rolled, reporters crowded the gates, and the private escape Michael had built was exposed to the world. Staff watched nervously from a distance, unsure what would happen next. Over 60 investigators from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department and District Attorney's Office entered the property with a search warrant, combing through bedrooms, offices, and storage areas. The raid was not quiet or discreet. It was loud, public, and overwhelming. Helicopters hovered overhead, patrol cars lined the roads, and the gates that had once symbolized fantasy now stood as the entrance to a crime scene. After the raid, the ranch changed almost overnight. The rides stopped, the animals were moved away, and the laughter that had once filled the air vanished. Before long, nature began reclaiming the property. Lawns grew wild, flowers wilted, and the fountains became dry. What had once been a showcase of fantasy now looked neglected. The lights that had illuminated the property at night were turned off, and windows reflected only shadows. Inside the main house, silence hung in every room. The walls, once alive with music and laughter, felt empty. The boy on the moon logo, once everywhere, still stared down from the walls and floors, a reminder of Michael's obsession with creating his own world. The home had been less about comfort and more about control, a place built to escape reality. Behind the scenes, the emotional impact on Michael was immediate. Neverland had been his fortress, a place where he held on to the parts of childhood he never fully experienced. It was the one place where he felt protected from the world and its expectations. Once the authorities entered, that sense of safety collapsed. The world he had designed to keep reality away could no longer serve its purpose. The raid did not just disrupt his routine, it broke the foundation of what Neverland meant to him. After that day, he could not see it the same way again. He later said he could never live there anymore, and those words told the world everything. The place he had poured his imagination into no longer felt like home. The moment the gates opened to investigators, the magic he tried to preserve disappeared with it. From 2005 to 2009, Neverland became what many described as its zombie phase. Staff members who had kept the property alive left gradually. The fountains stopped running, the animals were relocated, and the amusement park rides sat still as metal faded in the sun. Mail stacked up in offices, leaves gathered in corners, and the place that once felt full of energy shifted into a silent reminder of a different time. Michael visited only occasionally, moving through a property that no longer resembled the world he had imagined. The cost of keeping Neverland standing became difficult to manage. Without Michael living there, everything from electricity to staff salaries, Property taxes, insurance, and grounds maintenance added pressure to the estate. It was no longer functioning as a home or a playground. It had turned into a financial burden. And for years, people questioned whether the property would eventually be sold. Despite the silence, Neverland still held secrets. Inside the main house were memories, locked rooms, and symbols connected to Michael's attachment to childhood fantasy. These details made the property difficult to sell and continued to draw public interest. The lights were off, the rides were still, and the animals were gone. Yet the ranch remained filled with unanswered questions and reminders of how deeply personal this place had been for him. And by the end of the decade, Neverland had changed completely. From the outside, it looked like a beautiful but neglected estate. On the inside, it was a mix of fascination and unease. People could still recognize the magic that had once defined it, but they could also see the damage left behind. Even though Michael Jackson no longer lived there, the property continued to hold stories, quietly waiting for whatever would come next in its long and complicated history. But while the rides were gone, the secrets in the main house remained, and they were about to come out. The toxic asset. Why it wouldn't sell. By the time Neverland went back on the market, it was no longer just a regular estate. Real estate insiders quietly called it a toxic property. To try to make it more appealing, the owners attempted a full makeover. The estate was renamed Sycamore Valley Ranch. The amusement rides that had once spun with laughter were removed, roofs were repaired, and many of the features that tied the property directly to Michael Jackson were erased. Normally, it seemed like a fresh start. However, the stigma attached to Neverland could not be wiped away so easily. The world still remembered the name, the man, and the controversies surrounding the property. And that memory made buyers hesitate. Just as the estate returned to the market, the documentary Leaving Neverland aired. The documentary reignited old controversies and brought them into the public eye once again. Somehow, the property was no longer just land or buildings for sale. It was a headline, a story, and a symbol. Buyers were not just buying a home. They were taking on a reputation, attention, and public debate. News outlets shared every detail, and social media spread the discussion even further. Owning Neverland meant dealing with more than upkeep and money. It meant owning a piece of history that was still controversial. Inside the mansion, the features only added to the ranch's reputation. The master bedroom suite, for example, was not a traditional bedroom. It stretched across 2 floors and felt more like a fortified space than a place to sleep. Locked doors, unusual layouts, and the feeling of isolation created the sense that anyone who entered was being watched. It was a room built not just for comfort, but for security, privacy, and control. The safe room within the master suite added another layer. This was not just a simple closet. It was equipped with an alarm system, complete with bells that would ring if someone approached. For anyone touring the mansion, the room gave off an unsettling, almost unshakable sense of caution. It didn't stop there. Hidden passageways and strange locks on guest rooms made things even more mysterious. Some of these features were confirmed, while others were rumors. But all of them made the mansion feel less like a normal home. Urban explorers described the halls as puzzling, with doors and rooms that seemed to hide secrets. Every corner added to the feeling that the house was designed for its owner, not for ordinary living. There were also personal traces left behind. Urban explorers found stacks of fan mail hidden around the house. Some letters had drawings. Others had messages for Michael. One photo even showed the prosecuting attorney with devil horns drawn on it. These items made the house feel alive with memory. It was a place that kept pieces of Michael Jackson's life inside its walls. The combination of the mansion's unusual design, the hidden features, and the property's history made it very hard to sell. Buyers were not just looking at land and buildings. They were stepping into a place filled with the past. Renovations could change names and remove rides, but they could not remove the attention, the features, or the reputation. Neverland was more than land. It was an experience, and the experience carried weight that money could not fix. Managing 2,700 acres was another challenge. Even without the controversy, the size was overwhelming. Gardens, roads, buildings, and open land needed constant care. Keeping it all running costs millions every year. Add the public attention and the strange layout of the mansion, and it was easy to see why interest stayed low. The estate had become a white elephant, huge, unique, and almost impossible to manage for anyone without the resources to handle it. Even after repairs, Michael Jackson's presence lingered. The amusement rides were gone, and the animals had been moved. But the house still carried his world. Hidden rooms, strange locks, the safe room, and fan mail all reminded visitors of him. Every detail made the estate feel fascinating and a little unsettling. Walking through the mansion felt like stepping into history. It showed how much thought and imagination had gone into every corner. In the end, the mansion could not be sold. Even with a new name and renovations, the reputation stayed. Every room held secrets, every hallway hinted at something, and every discovery reminded people of who had once lived there. Neverland was no longer just a property. It was a puzzle wrapped in history, fame, and controversy. Even empty, the estate still had a presence. The master suite, safe room, hidden passageways, and fan mail made every visitor feel the energy of its past. The property had changed from a playground for a pop star to a strange, legendary place. It was beautiful, mysterious, and unforgettable. And even though the rides were gone and the zoo had left, Neverland still captured attention. Each secret room and unusual feature reminded people why the estate had once fascinated millions. It was no longer just a house for sale. It was a part of history, a symbol, and a property few dared to own. While the gates stayed closed and the rides were gone, people around the world kept watching, wondering what mysteries were hidden behind the walls. The urban legends and ghost stories. Even after the lights went out and the rides stopped spinning, people could not stop talking about Neverland. Rumors began to swirl, and before long, the estate felt almost alive in ways no one could have expected. Over time, stories of unusual happenings inside the house reached staff, security, and even people thinking about buying the property. It was as if the ranch had a life of its own and refused to let go of the world Michael Jackson had created. Some even went as far as to call it the breathing house. Former security guards claimed they felt an unseen presence as they walked through the halls. Doors were said to move slightly on their own. Faint footsteps echoed down empty corridors, and objects seemed to shift just out of reach. At first, these things were subtle and more a sense than something visible, but that alone was enough to unsettle professionals who were used to high-profile properties. Then, there were the sightings on the ranch at night. People claimed to see a figure moving silently among the trees. The figure walked with the grace and posture that reminded people of Michael Jackson. Some assumed it was a security guard making his rounds, but others were convinced it was something else. The rumors spread quickly, and they added a new layer of mystery to the ranch and made it feel even more strange and unforgettable. Even if these stories were just speculation, they had real consequences. Wealthy buyers who might have considered Neverland for its size or potential hesitated. Who would want to live in a property where the past seemed to linger in every shadow? The estate's history alone made it almost untouchable. For outsiders, the thought of walking through those halls felt intense. It was not just land or a mansion. It was a piece of someone else's life, complicated, famous, and surrounded by stories that refused to fade. The psychological effect on visitors was clear. Real estate agents noticed that even the bravest potential buyers sometimes backed away after touring the estate or hearing stories from former staff. Some claimed the ranch itself seemed to react to the people who entered. Spaces that had once been filled with laughter and music were replaced by a tense stillness. Every room and hallway seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for someone to disturb it. It was as if the walls remembered the life that had once moved through them and demanded respect. Urban legends only made the property more mysterious. Tales circulated about hidden rooms, secret passageways, and closets with bells that would ring if someone approached. Explorers discovered stacks of fan mail left behind for years. Some letters were sweet or funny, others strange or unsettling. One particularly notable discovery was a photograph of a prosecuting attorney with devil horns drawn on it. These discoveries turned Neverland from a simple, abandoned estate into a preserved fragment of Michael Jackson's personal world. Visitors approached the property with a mix of curiosity and caution. Every fence, silent ride, and empty room seemed to carry a piece of Michael's life. The more people tried to ignore these details, the more they demanded attention. Every small corner felt like a part of a story that the estate was still telling. For many, it was not just a property. It was a puzzle filled with history, fame, and mystery. Those who had worked at Neverland during Michael's lifetime claimed they noticed the changes after he left. The halls felt wider and emptier. The atmosphere felt different, lighter in some ways, but heavier in others. The energy that had once filled the ranch was gone. Every creak of the floorboards and every shadow in the corners seemed to invite a new story. This added to the fascination and unease that surrounded the property and made it feel like it belonged to a world outside of time. Money alone could not fix the problems on this ranch. Neverland comes with an unexplainable weight, one that makes even the wealthiest pause and wonder if they could live with it. No matter how much the estate was renovated or renamed, the stigma stayed. All these unsettling stories of figures moving in the dark, strange noises echoing through empty halls, and hidden rooms fueled curiosity and caution at the same time. The property had become almost a character itself, as if it demanded that anyone who entered acknowledge its past. Even as the years passed and the property stayed empty, the fascination never faded. In fact, the more people hesitated, the more others became curious. Each rumor added another layer to the legend. Every new story, true or imagined, kept the world watching. It was impossible to separate the estate from the life it had once held. And for this reason, Neverland remained in the spotlight even without a single resident. Every corner of the ranch seemed to whisper secrets. The gardens, silent amusement park, and towering gates all held traces of a life that was larger than most could imagine. People who explored or even drove past the property could feel it. The empty halls, silent pathways, and still rides told the story of a man who built a world of magic, lived in it, and left it behind in a way that no one could ever forget. The financial freefall. After the ghost rumors and unsettling stories about Neverland, a new problem had taken center stage. Money. The estate had become a financial trap, a property that could swallow millions without giving anything back. By 2015, the asking price was $100 million. For 2,700 acres in California, a massive mansion, and the remains of Michael Jackson's private amusement park, the estate was impressive. But the size, the upkeep, and the weight of its history made it nearly impossible to sell. 2 years later, in 2017, the price dropped to $67 million. Even with the lower price, buyers were still hesitant. Security alone was a full-time job. Pools, fountains, and landscaping all demanded constant attention. Staff still had to be paid. Every corner of the property required work, and the bills kept piling up. The estate was no longer just a house. It had become a huge, expensive responsibility that scared off even the wealthiest buyers. By 2019, the estate had dropped again, this time to $31 million. This was a dramatic fall, but it still did not attract serious offers. Real estate agents blamed the location, saying it was too far from Los Angeles. But anyone paying attention knew the truth. It was the stigma. It was tied to decades of controversy, high-profile legal cases, and endless public attention. Money could not erase that history. Maintenance costs alone were staggering. Even without the animals or amusement rides, the estate required millions every year. Pools needed cleaning, fountains needed repairs, and the land needed constant care. Security was still a must. Simply owning Neverland meant taking on endless responsibilities. For many, it became clear the estate was a white elephant. It was valuable, yes, but it cost more than it could ever give back. Agents tried everything to make it appealing. They highlighted the privacy, the land, and the chance to turn it into a unique retreat or a private compound. They promised buyers that with proper management, the estate could become a remarkable investment. Yet the shadow of Neverland's past proved too strong. Buyers weren't just buying land, they were buying the story that came with it. And most were not willing to take that on. By the end of the decade, Neverland had become a cautionary tale. The steady price drops showed that even enormous wealth could not overcome the psychological weight of the property. It had gone from a pop star's fantasy to a financial trap. Money alone could not fix the problem. The estate had become a symbol of a dream that had gone too far, and a burden that no one wanted. Yet, the financial decline also set the stage for something unexpected. Neverland was silent, empty, and overlooked, but it still had potential. Its value was no longer in being a home. It was in what it could become, in the possibility of someone seeing past the stigma and the cost. The estate was waiting for the right person, someone who could transform it into something more than just a money pit. The final sale and the twist. After years of sitting on the market, a buyer finally appeared. His name was Ron Burkle, a billionaire and a longtime friend of Michael Jackson. Unlike other buyers, he didn't flinch at the property's history, the rumors, or the mountain of maintenance it required. To most people, this was unbelievable. Who would dare take on a place that had been stuck on the market for so long? Now, the most interesting part was the price he paid: $22 million. In California, for 2,700 acres, that was shockingly low. Burkle wasn't buying the legend or the mansion. He was buying the land itself, the rides, the animals, and every story tied to Neverland were included. Yet the cost was just a fraction of what it had once been listed for. Many were stunned. How could a property once valued at over $100 million sell for so little? Well, the answer lay in Burkle's plan. He wasn't planning to live there or recreate a theme park. Instead, he was land banking, holding the land as an investment, while controlling a property that most others feared or avoided. In this way, he turned a notorious estate into a calculated and clever asset. Ironically, the magical kingdom Michael Jackson had built, a private world of fantasy, childhood wonder, and escape, was now silent. The laughter, the rides, the animals of the zoo, everything that had made Neverland alive, was gone. What had once been a public spectacle, constantly observed and dissected, had finally become a silent, contained investment. Yet even in stillness, Neverland's story wasn't over. In 2024, when filming began for a Michael Jackson biopic, the ranch stepped back into the spotlight. The circus, the rides, and the magic were briefly brought to life, giving the cameras a glimpse of the energy that had once filled every corner. For a short time, Neverland felt alive again, even if only as a performance, a fleeting echo of its past. Through it all, Neverland remained more than a property. It was a reflection of Michael Jackson himself. Every corner, every ride, and every animal had once been part of the story he wanted to tell. A story of dreams, obsession, and escape. And in the end, very few could handle that story. It required someone with vision, patience, and the resources to see the potential without being overwhelmed by the weight of the past. The estate had survived extremes, luxury, abandonment, scandal, and financial collapse. Today, it sits mostly unseen, watched by few, but remembered by many. It is no longer a public stage or a playground for a pop star's imagination. Instead, it is a private sanctuary, a silent witness to one of the most extraordinary lives in music history. Perhaps that is Neverland's ultimate lesson. It was never truly about the rides, the animals, or the mansion. It was about the man who created it, and the world he built within its gates. A world that was magical, strange, and sometimes unsettling. A world that could spark wonder, curiosity, or even unease. And when the gates finally closed, this world reflected the truth about Michael Jackson himself. A life that could never be contained, no matter how large or fantastical the home. Neverland may now be still, but its story is far from silent. It reminds us that even the grandest dreams come with weight, and that some of the most legendary places are measured not by what they are today, but by the history and memories they hold. Neverland wasn't a ranch, it was a mirror. And in the end, nobody wanted to look into it. After everything, do you think anyone could ever control the magic of Neverland? Or was it always meant to stay untouchable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next one on your screen.